The planet Xanthuria was home to many alien species, but none were more feared or respected than the Xanthuri Empire. At the center of that empire sat a throne, and on that throne sat the tiny Empress Virella. She stood no taller than a human. Child, her body slender and light, her eyes glowing violet, her voice sharp and commanding. Despite her small size, her words could make a room fall silent, and her decisions could destroy entire worlds. Empress Virella had one belief she held tightly: two humans were weak. She had allowed humans to join the Intergalactic Council for political balance, but in her heart, she laughed at them. Primitive. She often said emotional, fragile, and slow. The only reason they were tolerated was because of their unpredictable nature in war. But she thought even that was overhyped that morning. The grand hall of the palace was full of alien diplomats and scientists. All were gathered to watch a new energy core being installed beneath the palace floor, and among them was a human engineer. A middle-aged man named Colt Mercer. He didn't wear shining armor or carry weapons like the other aliens. He wore a dusty brown jacket, dark pants, and a utility belt full of old tools. Colt didn't speak much. He watched, measured, and worked quietly with a small scanner, checking the power lines that ran under the marble floors. He nodded politely when aliens spoke to him, but didn't bother explaining his methods to many. He seemed slow or boring, but he was focused. That made him dangerous, but no one saw it yet. The Empress walked into the hall, her guards clearing a path. She wore a golden crown with 3 purple stones and a long red robe that floated behind her like a flame. When she reached the center, she looked directly at Colt and smirked. "So this is the human they sent to fix our most advanced energy system," she said loudly. Everyone turned to look. Colt stood up straight, but didn't respond. "Tell me, human," she said, walking closer, "do you even understand the core you're standing on?" Colt's voice was calm. "Yes, Your Highness," she laughed, a high, sharp sound. "Fascinating that you think so," she said, circling him like a cat. "Humans can barely survive without machines, and yet they claim to master them." She looked to her advisors. "This is why I never fear their species. They may be clever, but they are not powerful." Colt said nothing. He picked up a cable, adjusted the coil, and went back to work. The Empress's laughter echoed through the room, and even some of the guards chuckled. But then it happened. A deep rumble shook the palace. Everyone froze. The lights flickered, and a sharp crack tore through the marble floor as smoke hissed up through the tiles. A deafening boom followed, and the energy core below exploded into fire and sparks. Chunks of stone flew across the room, screams filled the air. One of the tall columns cracked and fell right above the Empress. In a blink, her guards ran the other way. Abandoning her, she tried to leap, but the floor crumbled beneath her. She screamed not in power, but in fear as the ceiling above started to collapse. Colt didn't hesitate. He dropped his tools and ran through the smoke. He didn't run from danger, he ran into it. The Empress was trapped under fallen crystal tiles. Her leg pinned, her robe torn, her crown had rolled across the floor, and her tiny frame trembled as smoke filled her lungs. Then a strong pair of arms lifted her up. Colt scooped her from the wreckage like she weighed nothing, holding her tightly. As he turned and ran, she looked up at him, dazed and breathless. He wasn't even wearing armor, yet his body blocked falling debris as he shielded her. He coughed from the smoke, but didn't stop. His boots slid over broken tiles, and fire reflected in his eyes behind them. A second explosion shook the hallway, sending waves of energy outward. Flames spread across the banners that once showed the glory of the Xanthuri Empire. Colt kicked open a side door and rushed into the maintenance tunnel. It was dark, narrow, and full of dust, but it was stable. He laid the Empress down gently on the floor, her body trembling, her pride in pieces. She looked at him silent. For the first time, he looked back at her and simply said, You all right?" The Empress, for the first time in her life, didn't know what to say. She had just been saved by the very kind of being she always called weak. A human had carried her to safety while her own guards left her to die. Outside, alarms still rang. And the Empire burned. But inside that tunnel, something else began to shift, something deep, not in the ground, but in the Empress's heart and Colt. He wasn't finished yet. The maintenance tunnel was cold and narrow. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, barely showing the path forward. Colt sat against the wall, breathing heavily, his shoulders scratched and bleeding. In his arms, Empress Virella lay quiet, her golden robe burnt at the edges. Her pride wounded even deeper than her skin. For the first time in her life, she felt powerless, not because she was injured, but because someone had saved her, and that someone was a human she had mocked in front of her entire court just moments ago. "Why did you carry me?" she whispered, barely lifting her head. Colt looked at her with tired eyes. "Because you were about to die, you should have saved yourself," she replied, voice weak. Colt gave a short laugh. "That's not how we're built." She didn't answer. Her fingers touched the wall. Feeling the smooth steel, this tunnel hadn't been used in decades. Her empire was full of technology and pride, but none of it had helped her when everything went wrong. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the tunnel. Colt stood up quickly, holding the Empress tighter. He moved silently down the corridor, boots crunching softly over broken dust and glass. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Out," he said simply. "There's an emergency exit below the lower power wing," he continued, "but it's not marked on any new maps." She frowned. "Only old maintenance workers know that." "I used to be one," Colt replied, "before they asked me to join the Science Corps." The Empress felt strange. This human didn't brag or boast like the warriors she knew. He simply moved forward, calm, quiet, determined. She had insulted his entire race, and he didn't even mention it. Was that kindness or indifference? Behind them, the sound grew louder. Colt ducked into a side passage just in time as three shadowy figures entered the tunnel from the rear. Entrants, they were not rescue teams. Their armor was painted black. Their weapons glowing red. They were not here to save anyone. The Empress's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the insignia. They were elite assassins from her own empire. Varnox's private guard. She grabbed Colt's arm, whispering fast, "We need to move. Those men were not sent to save me." "I know," Colt replied, already checking his scanner. "They're moving in patterns, not searching." Hunting, Colt took a sharp turn into a vertical shaft and began climbing with one hand. Holding the Empress close to his chest, she clung to him without thinking, her pride forgotten for now. "How are you this strong?" she whispered. "I've climbed worse," Colt said through gritted teeth. "You're carrying a royal Empress." She said, "You're very light." He smirked. In the next chamber, Colt rested against the wall and set her down for a moment. "Why would Varnox betray me?" she asked. More to herself, he was loyal. Colt looked at her seriously. "No one is loyal when power is involved." She stared at him. "That's a very human thing to say." "No," he said. "That's a universal truth." Another boom rocked the hallway above them. A metal pipe crashed down nearby, sparking as it bounced. Colt flinched and shielded the Empress again. Even injured, his instinct was to protect her first. They moved again, down a broken ramp and through an old cargo tunnel. Every step was slower now. The Empress's leg was swollen, and Colt was bleeding from his side. Still, he kept going. Still, he never let go of her. "You're not like the humans I've read about," she whispered as they rested. Colt gave a tired smile, probably because those stories were written by people who never met us. "I thought your kind was emotional," she said. "I am," he replied, "but emotions don't make us weak." Suddenly, a red laser sliced past Colt's head, hitting the wall behind him. They ducked. Colt grabbing her again as he rolled them behind old cargo crates. The assassins had caught up, moving fast, no mercy in their eyes. "They're blocking the way," Colt muttered. "There's a path through the coolant ducts." The Empress said, "But you'll have to crawl." "Won't be the first time," he nodded. Colt lifted the floor panel and dropped into the duct. The space was tight. He had to push forward with one hand while dragging her with the other. The metal walls were freezing, and the sound of footsteps above echoed louder with every second. The Empress shivered in the cold, but something inside her was changing. This human didn't treat her like a ruler or like a weakling. He treated her like someone worth saving when they reached the other side. Colt pushed the grate open and pulled her through. The room beyond was an old emergency med bay. He laid her gently on the bed and collapsed beside her, breathing hard. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch his bloody shirt. "You're hurt," she whispered. "I'll survive," he said, barely able to keep his eyes open. The Empress looked at him. This weak human had carried her, shielded her, bled for her, and never once asked for anything in return. Her entire life, she had believed her people were superior. Now, she wasn't so sure. Outside, the palace continued to burn, but in that quiet med bay, under a broken ceiling and flickering lights. The most feared empress in the galaxy finally saw a human not as a joke, not as a tool but as something more, maybe even as her only hope. The med bay was dark and silent, only the soft hum of fading power systems echoed around them. Colt leaned against the wall, holding a bloody cloth to his side. The Empress sat on the cold medical bed, her robe torn and her tiny legs trembling. Her violet eyes stared at the floor, filled with confusion, not just from the pain, but from something deeper. Betrayal, a word she had used for others, so easily traitors, rebels, spies, but she had never imagined she would feel it herself, and not from her enemies, but from her own most trusted general, General Varnox. He was supposed to protect her. He had been by her side since her coronation. He had sworn loyalty to the throne, and now he had sent assassins to kill her, the Empress of Xantheria. Colt watched her from the corner. He didn't say much, he never did, but he could see she was struggling inside. His side hurt badly, but he ignored it. Right now, she needed clarity more than anything. "You heard them," Colt said finally, "in the tunnel." She nodded slowly. "They called you a confirmed casualty," he added, "and they're making sure that stays true." The Empress clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. "They think I'm dead," she whispered. Colt nodded. "That gives us an advantage." For now, she looked at him sharply. "We?" He didn't blink. "Yeah, we. You're just a human," she snapped, her voice cracking. "I was," he replied calmly. "But right now, the only one who didn't leave you behind." Silence filled the room again. The Empress turned away, ashamed of her words. He was right. No one had stayed night her guards, not her advisors, only Colt. She touched the edge of the medbed, feeling its broken corner. The Empire had built everything so perfectly, so clean, so strong, but it had all cracked in one moment. And in that moment, the one being she thought weakest had proven to be the strongest. Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from Colt's wrist communicator. He tapped it carefully, hiding the light under his sleeve. A faint video feed opened, fuzzy and shaky, but the voices were clear. General Varnox stood on the palace balcony, speaking to the public. "Today, we mourn the tragic death of our beloved Empress Varela," Heya said, pretending to wipe away a tear. "She was lost in the explosion caused by a failure in the new energy core." Colt and the Empress watched silently as Varnox continued. "But Xantheria must go on," he declared. "And I have been chosen by the council to serve as interim ruler. The Empress's hands shook with rage. He didn't even wait a day. She whispered. Colt stared at the screen, expression unreadable. He wanted the throne all along. Another voice came on screen, one of the council members. We found traces of sabotage evidence points to human interference. Colt's eyes narrowed. So that's their plan, he said. They'll blame me and all of humanity, start a war. The Empress added, her voice hollow, gain power through fear. She felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal, it was genocide waiting to happen. They would use her fake death to wipe out the humans from the council, maybe from the galaxy. Colt stood slowly, holding his side. We have to stop them. The Empress looked up at him. Her pride still raw. I'm injured, powerless, and hunted. I know, he said gently. But you're still the Empress. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes, not pity, but belief. No one had ever looked at her that went even her own guards. Colt believed she could fight back, even now. But how? She asked. He pulled out a small device from his built-in old transmission chip. This can connect to a hidden relay station beneath the city. He explained, you send a live message, show them you're alive, expose Varnox's lie. She hesitated. If she sent a message, she would reveal her location. Varnox's assassins would come again, this time in greater numbers. I'll buy you time, Colt said firmly. No, she replied. Not alone. He looked at her with a tired smile. You're starting to sound like a human. She blinked. Surprised at herself, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Together, they moved to the door. Colt helped her walk, and she leaned on him without protest for the first time. The Empress of Xanthoria walked beside a humanoid as a ruler. But as a partner in survival, the hallway beyond was silent, but in the shadows. Danger waited, and far above, in the sky, ships began to move. Varnox's plan was growing, and time was running out. But Empress Varela was no longer alone. And Colt Mercer was far more than just a weak human. The Empire had betrayed her now. It was her turn to fight back with the help of the very species she once mocked. The maintenance door groaned as Colt forced it open. A cold blast of recycled air hit their face as the inner utility chamber was active. Humming with hidden machines and blinking lights, the Empress leaned on Colt's arm, her ankle wrapped in old bandage tape. Her pride wrapped in silence, they were heading deeper underground. Toward the Signal Koran ancient relay station left behind from the early days of the Empire. Only the oldest workers knew about it. And one of them had been human, Colt Mercer. The quiet repairman with calloused hands and tired eyes. He didn't carry a weapon, he didn't wear armor. But he had something that the Empire had forgotten: courage. As they moved through the narrow hallway, the lights flickered above them. Some places were pitch black, others lit with red warning glows. The Empress walked slowly, holding Colt's shoulder for balance. Her eyes darted around. She was used to walking through marble halls with silk carpets. Now she was moving through dust, cables, and dripping water. How much farther? She asked, her voice low. 5 levels down. Colt replied, tapping on a cracked touchscreen. Once we get there, we can broadcast a full-spectrum message across the Empire. And if Varnox intercepts it? She asked. Then we die. Colt said simply, but not quietly. They reached a broken lift shaft, the platform gone, the walls scorched. Colt looked up and down, then nodded to himself. We climb, he said. You climb, she corrected. I'm too small to reach anything. Colt smirked. You're small enough to ride on my back. Her face flushed. Excuse me, I'll carry you, he said, kneeling. Again she hesitated, then slowly climbed onto his back, her arms around his neck. You humans are very strange, she muttered. Yeah, he whispered, but we don't let empresses fall to their deaths. With one hand gripping a cable and the other balancing her weight, Colt began the climb. His muscles burned, but he didn't slow down. They passed rusted pipes and hanging wires. Sparks flew near his feet, but he kept going. Halfway up, they heard a noise, metal footsteps. The Empress gasped, and Colt paused. "Listening? Drones," he whispered. 3 of them. A red light flashed through the shaft. Searching for movement, Colt pressed his body against the wall. One hand holding the Empress tightly, the drone scanned the shaft, then moved on. That was close. She breathed. "Too close," Colt said, then resumed climbing. Faster now. At the top, they pulled themselves into a dusty old access room. Screens were cracked. Wires spilled out like vines. The Empress slid off his back and stared at the chaos. "This is our hope," she whispered. "It will be," Colt said. "Once I fix it." He moved fast, hands working like they had a mind of their own. The Empress watched, confused. This human who she once called weak was now her strongest weapon. He rerouted energy through burnt circuits, patched wires with parts from his own gear. "Almost ready," he said, sweat on his brow, then a loud bang shook the floor. "They found us," the Empress whispered. Heavy metal boots echoed in the hallway. Colt grabbed a metal bar and looked around for cover. "No weapons," he said. "No guards," she added. "Just us." The door burst open. 3 armored assassins entered. Weapons raised, glowing red. The Empress stepped back. But Colt stepped forward, bar in hand. The first assassin fired. Colt dodged left and threw the bar. Hitting the weapon from the soldier's grip, he lunged forward, tackling the alien in 2. The wall, another assassin aimed at Colt's back, but the Empress screamed. The soldier turned and she threw a broken power coil at his face. It exploded in sparks, blinding him. Colt turned and kicked him to the ground. The last assassin raised a blade. Colt was too far, but the Empress acted. She grabbed a fallen blaster with both hands. It was heavy, but she fired. The energy blast hit the last soldier in the chest, sending him flying. Smoke filled the room, and silence returned. Colt coughed and looked at her. "You just saved me," he said. Surprised, she stared at the weapon, shaking. "I didn't think. I just acted." "Welcome to humanity," he smiled. They sealed the door behind them and returned to the console. "Systems ready," Colt said, fingers flying across the screen. "Once I hit send, the whole empire will see the truth." The Empress stepped forward, her face serious. "Let me speak," she said. "They need to hear it from me." He nodded and connected the feed. A glowing light turned on, and her face appeared on thousands of screens across the galaxy. "This is Empress Virella," she said, her voice firm but steady. "I am alive, and I have been betrayed. General, Varnox tried to kill me, and now he seeks to rule by fear." She looked at the camera and added, "But I will not be silent." Colt stood behind her, quiet but proud, and the galaxy watched in silence. The emergency broadcast raced across the galaxy, from royal stations to deep mining colonies. Every screen flickered with the same image: a tiny alien empress, bruised, tired, but very much alive. And standing behind her, a human with blood on his shirt and determination in his eyes. Gasps were heard across trading hubs and border worlds. Whispers spread fast. "She's alive," Varnox lied. A human saved her. Inside the relay station, Colt slumped to the floor, exhausted. He had sealed the doors again and turned the lights low, but his shoulder was burning and he could barely stay awake. The Empress knelt beside him, lifting his shirt with shaky fingers. Her tiny hands trembled as she cleaned the wound using what little medical gel was left. "Why didn't you tell me you were bleeding this badly?" she whispered. Colt gave a weak smile. "Didn't want you to worry. You carried me," she said, her voice cracking. "You protected me. And I let you walk around half dead." He looked into her eyes. "You didn't let me. I chose to." She sat beside him in silence, watching him breathe. Everything around them had collapsed: the empire, the palace, the command chain, but this human. He was still here, still loyal, and still thinking about others before himself. No one in her life had ever done that, not even those sworn to serve her. "You could have left me," she said after a long pause. "I thought about it," he joked. Then his smile faded. "But I saw your eyes under the rubble. I saw someone scared, someone abandoned, not an empress, and I just couldn't walk away." Tears formed in her eyes, not because she was weak, but because for the first time, someone saw her as more than a title. She wasn't Empress Virella in his eyes. She was just a person. Suddenly, the console beeped. Colt pushed himself up to check the screen. His fingers trembled as he read the incoming data. "She did it," he whispered. "Your message went viral. Systems all across the empire are rebroadcasting it." The Empress stood and looked over his shoulder, but then her heart dropped. A new message flashed across the screen. "Fleet. Incoming General Varnox's flagship approaching target. Your location, they're coming." She whispered. "They want to erase you completely," Colt said, closing the panel. "We need to leave now." Colt helped her up. Groaning from the pain, she shook her head. "You're not strong enough to carry me again." He smiled faintly. "I'll crawl if I have to." "No," she said firmly. "We do this together." They opened the back tunnel door and entered. The lower evacuation shaft, a few old hover carts rested there, dusty but usable. Colt grabbed one and helped her climb onto it. The small pod whirred to life, and they sped down the tunnel toward the outer ridge. "Do you think anyone heard me?" she asked as they moved. "More than you know," he replied, eyes locked. "On the path ahead, but will they believe me?" she asked again. Colt didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Some will, some won't, but the ones who matter already do." Outside, the wind roared across the rocky wasteland. They emerged from the tunnel into a canyon where a small abandoned spaceport stood. A single shuttle sat in the corner, old, rusted, half covered in vines. Colt ran to it and began checking the engine. "She's ugly," he said, "but she fly." The Empress stood beside him, holding a tool. "Then let's make her fly." Together, they started the startup sequence. The engine sputtered, but came to life, coughing out dust and flames, but just as they prepared to launch. The sky darkened. Above them, a massive warship descended slowly. Black metal, glowing red lights, and the symbol of Varnox on its side, dozens of drones poured out, heading straight toward them. The Empress looked at Colt. Fear rising again. "We can't outrun them," she said. "We're not going to," he replied, flipping a switch. "We're going to punch through." He launched the shuttle with a roar, blasting through the narrow canyon. Lasers fired from above, but Colt zigzagged between rock walls. Smoke filled the cabin. Sparks flew. The Empress held onto her seat, heart pounding. A blast hit the rear. Winged the ship shook violently. "We won't make it," she whispered. Then she heard Colt growl. "Yes, we will." He pressed a hidden button, releasing a burst of counterfire from the old ship's belly. One of the drones exploded, then another, but the ship was still surrounded. Then, without warning, human fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Dozens of ships bearing the Earth Alliance insignia fired at Varnox's fleet. The Empress's message had reached them. Colt laughed. "I told you someone was listening." The Empress stared out the window, speechless. Human ships defended. Her, the same Empress who once said humans were beneath her. Now they were fighting for her life. As the ship broke free from the canyon and entered orbit, she reached out and grabbed Colt's hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He looked at her, surprised. But he didn't let go. The small shuttle rocked as it entered. Low orbit, fire streaked across the window as they passed through the upper atmosphere. Colt clutched the controls tightly, sweat dripping down his face. The old ship shook like it would fall apart any second, but it held. Beside him, Empress. Varela sat silently, her eyes focused on the view outside. Below them, her once mighty capital burned. Above them, Varnax's fleet hovered like vultures. Blocking escape, human ships had arrived to help. But they were outnumbered. Too many enemy vessels, too little time. Colt's voice was low. "We won't make it to the stars with this engine." The Empress turned to him. "Then what do we do?" He pointed to a nearby station, a neutral trade ring drifting between Xantherius moons. "It's not far," he said. "If we reach it, we can request asylum or refuel for a jump. But it's crawling with bounty hunters." She replied. Colt gave a small smile. Better than getting blasted out of the sky. Suddenly, warning lights flashed. The left wing had taken more damage than they thought. Colt tapped the controls, trying to stabilize the shuttle. Then it happened. A bolt of plasma struck the ship from behind. The explosion tossed them sideways. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the cockpit. Colt was thrown from his seat, crashing hard against the wall. "Colt!" The Empress screamed, crawling to him. His face was pale, blood trickling from his forehead. He opened his eyes, blinking slowly. "I'm okay," he whispered. Though his body told a different story. "You're not," she snapped, tears forming in her eyes. "You saved me over and over. Now it's my turn." The autopilot failed, the ship falling into a slow spiral toward the trade ring. Colt reached out and took her hand. "You have to leave," he said, struggling to speak. "There's an escape pod in the back. It's calibrated to your DNA. You can survive this." But the Empress shook her head fiercely. "No," she said. "I'm not leaving you. I'm the Empress, and I command myself to stay." Colt tried to sit up, but pain shot through his side. "You don't understand," he coughed. "If you stay, you might die." "If I leave," she whispered. "A part of me dies anyway." She ran to the back and powered up the escape pod. But instead of climbing in alone, she dragged Colt's body toward it. Every step was slow, painful, but she didn't stop. She placed him inside the pod, then squeezed herself in beside him. It was built for one person, but she didn't care. Alarms blared, metal groaned. The shuttle was falling apart. She reached out and slammed the launch button. The pod burst from the side of the ship like a bullet, just before the shuttle exploded behind them. Flames followed them through the blackness. Colt's head rested on her lap. Barely conscious, the pod rattled violently, then slowed as it neared the trade ring. An emergency beacon activated automatically, and within seconds, a docking claw from the ring latched onto the pod, pulling them inside. They landed hard metal, scraping against metal inside the station. Dozens of beings watched as the pod doors opened. Guards ran forward, weapons ready, but froze in shock because stepping out of the pod, barely standing, was Empress Varela, holding the body of a broken human in her arms. "I demand medical aid," she shouted, her voice echoing through the docking bay. "Not for me, for him." Doctors rushed in, taking Colt from her arms. She followed close, limping, refusing to leave his side. She didn't care who saw her. Not the bounty hunters, not the merchants, not even her enemies. She sat beside his medical bed, holding his hand as they worked on him. Blood soaked the sheets, machines beeped, and time moved like cold syrup. Hours passed. Finally, a doctor approached. "He's stable," the alien said gently, "but he needs rest." The Empress didn't move. Her eyes locked on Colt's face. "I never understood your kind," she whispered. "Always sacrificing. Always helping. I thought it was weakness." She smiled sadly. "But now I see it's your strength." She leaned close, whispering near his ear. "You saved me when no one else did. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you're never alone again." As the trade ring prepared to send her message to the galaxy, one image spread, faster than any war signal. An image of the Empress once, proud and distant, holding a human's hand with tears in her eyes. And in that moment, everything changed. The galaxy didn't just see her as a ruler, they saw her as someone who had learned the true meaning of loyalty because she refused to leave the one person who had never left her. Colt woke up to the soft sound of humming machines. His body felt heavy, like he had slept for 100 years. But the first thing he saw wasn't a doctor or a ceiling light. It was her, sitting quietly beside him, holding his hand. Empress. Virella, the ruler of 1,000 systems, looked down at him with tired but gentle eyes when she noticed he was awake. She smiled a real smile, not cold, not proud, just soft. "You stubborn human," she whispered. "You're awake." Colt blinked slowly, his throat dry. "You didn't leave," he said hoarsely. "I told you I wouldn't," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "This time I stayed." The trade ring had become a strange kind of shelter after the escape pod landed. Word of the Empress's survival spread like wildfire, not just through her own empire, but across neutral space, and more importantly, across human colonies. The Earth Alliance sent a delegation. They came not with weapons, but with medicine, support, and a message. They had seen what Colt did, and they stood ready not for war, but for peace. Meanwhile, Varnox's lies began to crumble. Systems that once bowed to him now questioned his rise. Many had seen the broadcast, had heard the Empress speak. But more powerful than her words was the image an Empress once proud. Now cradling a broken human in her arms, the image shattered old beliefs. It shook the ancient walls of pride that had separated species for centuries, because in that one moment, compassion had spoken louder than power ever could. Inside the medbay, Colt slowly sat up. His body was healing, but his mind was still tired. He looked at her. "So, what now?" Virella stood, straightened her shoulders, and answered, "Now I take back my throne, but I won't rule the same way again. I've seen too much." Colt raised an eyebrow. "You sure your people will follow you?" She nodded. "Some will hesitate, but when they see you standing beside me, they'll understand something has changed." "And what about you?" he asked. "Do you really believe in humans now?" She paused, then walked over to the window, staring out into the stars. "I used to think humans were wild, emotional, foolish," she said softly. "Now I see you're something else. Dangerous not because of your weapons, but because of your heart. You're loyal, even when you shouldn't be. You protect. Even when it's not your job, you love without asking anything in return." She turned back to face him, her voice clear. "Yes, I believe in humans now, because you showed me what humanity truly means." Later that day, inside the trade ring's main chamber, the Empress stood before cameras again. Her hair was tied back, her royal robe torn but worn with pride. And beside her stood Colt, wearing a patched-up uniform with human insignia. "I am Empress Virella of Xanthoria," she began, "and I was wrong." Gasps echoed in the chamber now. "Ruler in history had ever admitted such a thing," she continued. "I called humans weak, emotional, and primitive, but one of them carried me when my own guards ran. One of them fought for me when my generals betrayed me, and when I was lost, he stayed." Colt stood quietly, saying nothing. But his presence alone said everything. "I will return to my throne," the Empress said, "but not to rule with fear. I will build a new future with humanity." Not above them, she raised her hand, and to everyone's surprise, she reached for Colt's. He took it gently, and together they stood before the galaxy. Later that night, as the stars drifted outside the window of the trade ring, Colt sat alone, looking out. He never wanted to be a hero. He was just an engineer, a quiet man with grease on his hands and patience in his soul. But somehow he had changed an empire. Not with war, but with loyalty, courage, and kindness. The door slid open and Varela entered. Wearing a simple cloak, no crown, no guards, she sat beside him, close but silent. "I meant what I said today," she whispered. "I want you with Manat as a servant, not as a symbol, but as someone I trust." Colt looked at her, and if I say no, she smiled gently. "Then I thank you and let you walk away." He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I've come too far to walk away now." The Empress leaned her head on his shoulder, and in that quiet, broken space station, far from thrones and armies, a new chapter began, not just for them, but for both of their worlds, because once she had mocked humanity, now she owed it everything.